Have you ever wondered what it would be like to give your own life out of love for your child? The story of St. Gianna Beretta Molla offers us a moving answer to this question. In a world where life is often devalued, this contemporary saint shows us the face of true love, one that is willing to sacrifice everything for the good of the beloved, following the example of Christ who gave his life for us. Her testimony, more eloquent than 1,000 sermons, continues to inspire families, doctors, and faithful throughout the world. Chapter 1. Roots of Holiness, Childhood and Spiritual Formation. Gianna Beretta was born on 4 October 1922 in Magenta, a small town near Milan, Italy. She was the 10th of 13 children of Alberto and Maria Beretta, exemplary parents who created a home where the Catholic faith was not merely a set of rules, but the very foundation of existence. The testimonies of those who knew the Beretta family agree in describing a family atmosphere steeped in Christian values, where daily prayer and attendance at Holy Mass were as natural as breathing. The morning and night prayers framed each day, constantly reminding them of God's presence in their lives. The little Gianna stood out from an early age for her sincere piety and reflective character. At the age of 5, she received First Communion, an experience that would mark her young soul profoundly. That first encounter with Jesus in the sacrament awakened in her a burning love for the Eucharist that would accompany her throughout her life. Her notebooks from that time, preserved by her family, reveal childish drawings of the sacred host and the chalice, silent testimony to an Eucharistic devotion that went beyond what is usual in a girl her age. Her mother, attentive to these signs, fostered this inclination by teaching her to make visits to the Blessed Sacrament whenever they passed near a church. Marian devotion held a special place in the Beretta home. The rosary was prayed each night as a family, and Gianna learned from an early age to seek refuge under the protective mantle of the Virgin Mary. At 12, she joined the Daughters of Mary, a parish association that cultivated Marian piety among young women. For her, this membership was not merely a social activity, but a true spiritual commitment that led her to imitate the virtues of the Mother of God: purity, humility, self-giving, and fidelity. Her spiritual director at the time noted how Gianna distinguished herself by her recollection during prayer and by her constancy in the resolutions she formulated during the association's monthly retreats. The adolescent years, which for many imply a distancing from religious practice, were for Gianna a time of deepening in faith. Her active participation in Catholic action allowed her to understand that faith had to be translated into concrete works of apostolate. The parish priest of Magenta recalled how the young Gianna organized catechism classes for the poorest children of the parish, visited the sick bringing them spiritual and material comfort, and encouraged other young women to live their faith coherently. At 15, she began to write a spiritual diary in which she noted her meditations and resolutions, revealing uncommon maturity. Jesus, I promise to submit myself to everything you permit to happen to me. I only ask you to make your will known to me. Trials were not long in coming for the Beretta family. The death of several siblings and the economic difficulties during the Second World War tested Gianna's faith. However, these painful experiences, far from distancing her from God, forged in her an unshakable confidence in divine providence. In her letters from that period, one is surprised at the serenity with which she faced those trials. Suffering is like an iron that purifies, like a chisel that sculpts the soul to make it more pleasing in God's eyes. This attitude toward suffering, learned in her youth, would be fundamental for facing the supreme test that awaited her years later. Chapter 2. The Professional Vocation as a Path to Holiness. Gianna's choice of a medical career was not an improvised decision, but the fruit of a long vocational discernment. Although she had felt attracted to missionary religious life, Especially during certain spiritual retreats of Catholic action, she gradually understood that God was calling her to sanctify herself in the midst of the world. In 1942, in the middle of the Second World War, she began her medical studies at the University of Milan. Her brother Ferdinando, a missionary priest, encouraged her in this decision, reminding her of Christ's words, "I was sick, and you visited me." For Gianna, these gospel words illuminated her understanding of medicine as a vocation of service to Christ present in the sick. During her university years, Gianna stood out not only for her academic brilliance, but also for her ability to integrate faith and science. She took an active part in Catholic student circles, where she bravely defended the Christian vision of the human person against the materialist currents that were beginning to permeate medicine. Her spiritual director at the time, Father Giuseppe Beretta, no family relation, testified during the canonization process how Gianna rejected any medical practice that attacked the dignity of human life, something that caused her some difficulties during her hospital internships. "The human person is sacred," she wrote in her notes, "because he is a temple of God and is destined for eternal life. The physician must always remember this fundamental truth." In 1949, Gianna graduated in medicine and surgery with brilliant grades, later specializing in pediatrics at the University of Milan. Her choice of pediatrics revealed her predilection for the most vulnerable, children. For her, every child was a precious gift from God, a unique and unrepeatable life worthy of the greatest respect and care. Her doctoral thesis, dedicated to the study of certain childhood pathologies, reflected not only her scientific competence, but also her deep concern for the suffering of the little ones. Upon receiving her specialist diploma, she wrote in her diary, "Lord, I offer you my hands to heal, my mind to understand, and above all my heart to love your little ones." In 1950, she opened her medical practice in Messero, a small town near Magenta. The office of Dr. Gianna, as her patients affectionately called her, soon became a place where the sick found not only competent medical care, but also human and spiritual comfort. Her fees were modest, and she often treated families with no resources free of charge. It was even common to see her quietly leave money for mothers who could not buy medicine for their children. "Remember," she would say to a young nurse who worked with her, "that we are dealing not only with bodies, but with immortal souls redeemed by Christ. In every patient, especially in the poorest, we must see Jesus himself coming to visit us." Alongside her private practice, Gianna dedicated several hours a week to a school clinic where she attended free of charge to children from humble families. She was especially sensitive to the needs of single mothers and their children, to whom she provided not only medical assistance, but also material and moral support at a time when these women suffered severe social discrimination. A social worker who collaborated with her recalled, "Dr. Beretta never judged these mothers. On the contrary, she treated them with extraordinary respect and delicacy, helping them regain their dignity and raise their children in decent conditions." This testimony of Christian charity without ostentation or prejudice manifested the authenticity of her faith, which was translated into concrete works of mercy. Chapter 3. Courtship as Preparation for Christian Marriage. Gianna's vocational discernment continued during her first years as a physician. Although she had understood that her vocation was sanctification in the secular world, she remained open to the possibility of consecrating herself as a lay missionary. In her personal writings from that period, frequent prayers appear, asking for light to know God's will clearly. In 1954, during a Mass on the Feast of the Immaculate Conception, she felt an interior peace that she interpreted as a sign that God was calling her to marriage. A few weeks later, at a family celebration, she met the engineer Pietro Molla, a man of deep Catholic convictions who worked in a nearby factory. That meeting, apparently casual, had been providentially prepared. The first conversations between Gianna and Pietro revealed a notable spiritual harmony. They shared not only the Catholic faith, but also the same vision of marriage as a vocation to holiness and of conjugal love as a reflection of Christ's love for his church. During the months of mutual acquaintance, Gianna wrote numerous letters to Pietro that have been preserved and constitute a true treatise on marital spirituality. "Marriage is a collaboration with God," she told him in one of them, "not only in procreation but in the formation of new saints for heaven. That is why we must prepare ourselves with prayer and sacrifice, purifying our love so that it may resemble Christ's." Gianna and Pietro's courtship, which lasted a little less than a year, was characterized by deep mutual respect and a progressive deepening of their knowledge of each other. Aware that they were preparing for a sacrament and not simply for a social ceremony, they devoted time to joint prayer and to participating in retreats for engaged couples organized by the Diocese of Milan. A priest who accompanied them during this period recalled the seriousness with which they addressed topics such as the Christian education of future children, family finances, or the life of prayer in the home. Gianna, with her medical training, was especially concerned with preparing herself to live conjugal sexuality according to the Church's teachings, understanding its sacred character as an expression of total and fruitful love. On 24 September 1955, Gianna and Pietro were married in the Basilica of St. Martin in Magenta. She was then 33 years old, an age considered late for marriage at that time. During the Eucharistic celebration, the newlyweds consecrated their union to the Blessed Virgin, asking for her maternal protection over the home they were beginning to form. As a wedding gift, Gianna offered Pietro a ring with a meaningful inner inscription: "Love and sacrifice," words that would prove prophetic. After the ceremony, instead of a conventional honeymoon, they made a pilgrimage to various Marian shrines, culminating in an audience with Pope Pius X, who bestowed a special blessing on their married life. They established their home in Ponte Nuovo, a neighborhood of Magenta, in a modest yet welcoming house that Gianna decorated with simplicity and good taste. A crucifix presided over the main room, reminding them that Christ was the center of that newly born home. From the first days of their married life, they established traditions that reflected the centrality of faith: joint prayer at the beginning and end of the day, attendance at Sunday Mass as the high point of the week, and shared reading of the Gospel each night. Their new home soon became a place of welcome for relatives, friends, and people in need, showing that Christian marriage is called to be a visible sign of God's love in the midst of the world. Chapter 4. Wife and Mother. Holiness in the Everyday. The first months of marriage were for Gianna a time of adaptation to her new vocation. As a professional woman who had enjoyed a certain independence, learning to share life entailed small daily renunciations that she assumed with joy for love of her husband. Her correspondence with friends from that time reveals how she understood marriage not as a limitation of her freedom, but as a new dimension of her existence that enriched her fully. "Conjugal love," she wrote to a doctor friend who doubted whether to marry, "does not diminish our personality, it completes it. In Pietro, I have found not only a husband but a companion who helps me become a better doctor and a better Christian." She continued practicing medicine part-time, reorganizing her consulting hours so as to attend properly to her domestic responsibilities. For Gianna, caring for the home was not a task of lesser category than her medical profession. Both dimensions constituted her integral vocation as a woman. She carefully tended to details that made family life pleasant, preparing Pietro's favorite dishes, decorating each room simply yet warmly, and arranging small surprises that kept the flame of love alive. Neighbors recalled how, despite her university education, she did not disdain learning traditional recipes or household tips from older women, showing a humility that contrasted with the elitist mentality of many professionals of her era. The arrival of children filled the Molla home with joy. On 19th of November 1956, Pierluigi, their firstborn, was born, followed by Mariolina on 11th December 1957 and Laura on 15th of July 1959. Each birth was welcomed with immense gratitude as a gift from God. Gianna, who as a doctor had helped bring numerous children into the world, now experienced motherhood firsthand, discovering new dimensions of this mystery. Each child, she wrote in her diary, is a unique creation of God, an immortal soul entrusted to our care. What a great responsibility and what an immense honor. The baptism of each little one, celebrated a few days after birth, was lived as the most important moment, even more than physical birth, since it meant spiritual rebirth and incorporation into the church. As a mother, Gianna combined tenderness with educational firmness. Aware that the first years are fundamental for character formation, she devoted time to observing each child's inclinations, respecting their unique personality and helping them develop their potential. She taught them the first prayers adapted to their infant understanding, narrating with simple words biblical stories that awakened their religious imagination. Pietro recalled how, when putting them to bed, Gianna would have them look at the crucifix, saying, "Look, Jesus loves you so much that he stretched his arms out on the cross for you." These first seeds of faith, planted with maternal love, would blossom after her death, when her children had to face their mother's absence with the certainty that she had not abandoned them but had gone to the Father's house. Despite the help of a domestic employee who collaborated in household tasks, Gianna experienced the fatigue typical of a mother with 3 small children who also worked outside the home. However, those who dealt with her at that time agree in highlighting her constant serenity and joy. Her secret was an intense interior life that sustained her amid daily occupations. Father Lino Garavaglia, her confessor in those years, testified that Gianna had reached what St. Francis de Sales calls the ecstasy of action, the capacity to remain united to God in the midst of the most ordinary activities. "Every diaper I change," she confided to a friend from Catholic Action, "every meal I prepare, every patient I attend, is a prayer if I offer it to God out of love." Chapter 5. The Christian Home, a Domestic Church. The Molla Beretta household was an authentic example of what the Second Vatican Council would later describe as a domestic church. Christ was truly the invisible yet real center of that family. Each morning began with the prayer of offering the day, and each night ended with the recitation of the Holy Rosary as a family. Above the headboard of the marital bed, a crucifix reminded them that conjugal love was under Christ's loving gaze. These were not imposed devotions, but natural expressions of a deeply rooted faith that permeated every aspect of family life. The Sunday Eucharist constituted the central moment of the week. Gianna carefully prepared her children to participate in Holy Mass, explaining in words suited to their age the great mystery celebrated there. Dressed in their best clothes, the whole family attended the celebration not as a duty to fulfill, but as a joyful encounter with the risen Lord. Often after Mass, they visited some sick or elderly parishioner, teaching by example that faith must be translated into concrete works of mercy. "Mama explained to us," Laura would recall years later, "that we carried Jesus in our hearts after Mass, and that we should share him with those who were alone or suffering." The Molla family lived the liturgical year intensely, making religious feasts genuine family celebrations. Advent was prepared with a wreath whose candles were lit each night during family prayer. A small nativity scene was progressively completed as a symbol of the interior journey of preparation to receive Jesus. Christmas was celebrated with Christian simplicity, balancing material gifts with the true gift they commemorated. Lent was a special time of conversion, adapted to the age of each family member. Even the little ones took part in simple mortifications, learning the value of sacrifice for love of Christ crucified. Marian feasts received special attention, manifesting the centrality of devotion to the Virgin Mary in the family spirituality. Christian charity was lived naturally in the Molla home. Their house was always open to those who needed help. Gianna frequently invited lonely or needy people to eat, especially on important feast days. She collaborated actively with the parish caritas, involving her children in preparing packages for poor families. "We have a lot," she explained to them, "and Jesus asks us to share with those who have less." This daily testimony of Christian charity was more effective than any theoretical lesson. Pietro remembered how, one winter night, Gianna gave her new coat to a pregnant patient who had come to the office without clothing suitable for the cold. When he asked her why she had given away her best coat, she replied simply, "Because it is what Jesus would have done." The children's education integrated faith and culture harmoniously. Gianna read to her little ones not only lives of saints adapted to their age, but also classic tales and quality children's literature that nourished their imagination and sensitivity. She considered musical and artistic formation important, seeing in beauty a privileged path to God. She herself played the piano and taught songs to her children. On Sunday afternoons, she often organized small family excursions into nature, showing the children creation as an open book that speaks of its creator. "Look at that beautiful flower," she said to little Laura. "Only God could create something so lovely." These simple yet profound lessons prepared the ground for a mature and personalized faith capable of withstanding life's trials. Which aspect of her life touches you most deeply? Her professional dedication, her exemplary family life, or her final sacrifice? I would love to know if at any time you have felt her intercession in your lives, especially those mothers who have faced difficult pregnancies or Catholic doctors who struggle to remain faithful to their principles in challenging environments. Share your experiences and reflections so that we may enrich one another in the faith. Chapter 6. The Last Pregnancy, Supreme Test of Love. At the end of 1961, Gianna joyfully received the news of her fourth pregnancy. Although she was already 39 years old, an age considered advanced for motherhood at that time, she welcomed this new life as a divine gift. However, the initial joy was overshadowed when, in the second month of gestation, she began to experience intense abdominal pain. Medical tests revealed the presence of a uterine fibroma of considerable size, a benign tumor which, situated dangerously close to the developing fetus, gravely complicated the pregnancy and put at risk both the mother's life and that of the child. The medical team attending her presented 3 possible treatments: a therapeutic abortion followed by removal of the tumor, thus saving her life; a complete hysterectomy, removal of the uterus with the fetus inside, also resulting in the death of the unborn child, or attempting to remove only the fibroma, preserving the pregnancy, an extremely risky operation that could cause fatal hemorrhaging during the procedure. For many, even for practicing Catholics, the first 2 options could be morally justified under the principle of double effect, considering that the death of the fetus would be a secondary effect not directly intended. Gianna, however, with the moral clarity that characterized her, immediately rejected the first 2 alternatives. "If you must decide between my life and the child's," she said firmly to the doctors, "do not hesitate. Choose the child's. I insist, save the baby." Her decision did not stem from a momentary emotional impulse, but from deeply rooted Catholic convictions regarding the sacred value of all human life from conception. As a physician, she perfectly understood the risks she assumed. As a Christian, she was willing to follow the example of Christ, who gave his life for others. The operation to remove only the fibroma was performed at San Gerardo Hospital in Monza. Before the intervention, Gianna received the sacraments and entrusted her life and that of her child to divine providence. The surgery was technically successful, managing to remove the tumor without harming the fetus. but the doctors warned Gianna and Pietro that the pregnancy remained high risk. The following weeks were extremely difficult, with painful complications and the constant uncertainty about the outcome. During this period, Gianna showed a supernatural serenity that emanated from her deep interior life. "I am not afraid," she confided to her sister, Sister Virginia, a Canossian nun, "for I have placed myself completely in God's hands. Whatever He wills will be the best." As the pregnancy progressed, Gianna prepared herself spiritually for what she sensed might be the supreme sacrifice. She received Holy Communion daily, finding in the Eucharist the strength for her self-giving. With evangelical simplicity, she prepared everything for the baby's arrival and left detailed instructions for the care of her other children in case of her death. "If you have to choose between my life and the baby's," she told Pietro in one of their last intimate conversations, "do not hesitate, choose the child's. I've thought about it a great deal in prayer. It is God's will." On Good Friday, 1962, feeling that childbirth was near, she confessed to her sister, "If you knew how much I have prayed to the Lord to take this chalice away from me, but if it is not possible, I am ready." These words, which evoked Jesus' prayer in the Garden of Olives, revealed her complete acceptance of the divine will, even in the face of the extreme suffering that awaited her. Chapter 7. Childbirth, Suffering and Death. Configuration with Christ. On Holy Saturday, 21st April 1962, Gianna was admitted to San Gerardo Hospital in Monza to give birth. Given the complexity of the case, the doctors decided to perform a scheduled cesarean section. Before entering the operating room, Gianna, fully aware of the risks, reiterated her will. "If you must choose, save the child." The cesarean was successful, bringing into the world a healthy girl weighing 4.5 kilos, who was named Gianna Emanuela in homage to her mother. Upon awakening from anesthesia and learning that her daughter had been born well, Gianna whispered, "Thank you, Jesus. I thank you for having allowed me to be a mother once more." However, in the hours following the birth, Gianna's health deteriorated rapidly. She developed septic peritonitis, a severe infection of the peritoneum, with very high fevers that plunged her into extreme suffering. Despite antibiotics and intensive care, her condition worsened day by day. The doctors, some of them colleagues and personal friends, fought desperately to save her, experiencing impotence in the face of the inexorable decline of that exceptional woman. Pietro remained constantly at her side, dividing his time between the hospital and caring for their other 3 small children, supported only by faith and prayer. After a week with no improvement and understanding that the end was approaching, Gianna asked to return to her home in Ponte Nuovo to spend her last days there. "I want to die at home," she said with a weak but determined voice, "surrounded by my children and the things I love." Respecting her wish, she was transferred by ambulance on 27th April, accompanied by Pietro and a nurse. Upon arriving home, she asked to see each of her children. She blessed 5-year-old Pierluigi, 4-year-old Mariolina, and almost 3-year-old Laura one by one, placing a kiss on their foreheads. To little Gianna Emanuela, still in the hospital under neonatal care, she sent a message through Pietro. "Live for God's glory and always be a good Christian." The final agony was especially painful. The very high fever caused intense pain and moments of delirium. In her lucid moments, Gianna did not complain. Instead, she offered her suffering united to Christ's passion. "Jesus, I love you. Jesus, I abandon myself to you," she repeated constantly. The parish priest of Ponte Nuovo came to administer the last sacraments. During the anointing of the sick, Gianna briefly regained serenity, receiving the sacrament with full awareness and devotion. In her last hours, her sister, Sister Virginia, held her hand while praying the rosary by her side. Shortly before dawn on 28th April 1962, after a night of intense suffering, Gianna surrendered her soul to God. Her last audible words were, "Jesus, I love you." She was 39 years old. The funeral, celebrated in the parish church of Ponte Nuovo, gathered an astonishing crowd of people. Family members, friends, patients, neighbors, civil and health authorities. Many of those present were not regular churchgoers, but they came moved by the impactful testimony of that woman who had carried her self-giving to the ultimate consequences. During the homily, the priest did not need to deliver an elaborate eulogy. He simply recounted the facts of Gianna's life and death, whose eloquence surpassed any speech. "Today we have buried a saint," commented an agnostic doctor upon leaving the cemetery, expressing the widespread feeling that they had witnessed something extraordinary. The ceremony, far from being a moment of despair, was imbued with Christian hope in the resurrection. Pietro, sustained by an admirable faith, participated with serenity, aware that it was not a definitive goodbye, but a temporary separation. The liturgical songs, carefully chosen, expressed this paschal certainty. Christ is risen. In the Father's house, the Lord is my shepherd. The attendees left moved but consoled, carrying in their hearts the seed of an example that would bear abundant fruit in the years to come. Chapter 8. The Family Legacy. Pietro and the Children. Gianna's sudden absence left Pietro with the immense responsibility of raising 4 small children alone. Pierluigi was barely 5 years old, Mariolina 4, Laura 2, and little Gianna Emanuela was a newborn. Many wondered how this man with demanding professional responsibilities could face such a challenge. Nevertheless, Pietro revealed an extraordinary inner strength, rooted in deep faith and in the certainty that Gianna from heaven remained present in their lives. "I am not alone in this task," he confessed to his relatives. "I constantly feel Gianna's help, accompanying us in an invisible but real way." The first months were especially difficult. Pietro completely reorganized his professional life in order to dedicate more time to his children. He counted on the invaluable help of relatives, especially his sister Zita and Gianna's sister Maria, who actively collaborated in caring for the little ones. Despite the advice of some friends, Pietro decided not to hire a permanent governess, preferring to keep the family atmosphere as close as possible to what Gianna would have desired. Each night, he gathered the children to pray together, following the tradition established when Gianna was alive. He constantly spoke to them about their mother, showing them photographs and telling them anecdotes from her life, keeping her memory alive not as an idealized figure of the past, but as a presence that continued influencing their lives. An additional trial struck the family when Mariolina, the second daughter, passed away on 12th of February 1964 due to a serious kidney disease. She was only 6 years old. This new sorrow, which could have destroyed many people's faith, was interpreted by Pietro and the children with a supernatural perspective. "Now, Mariolina is with Mama in heaven, watching over us," Pietro explained to little Pierluigi and Laura. Mariolina's photo was placed next to Gianna's in the family album, and her memory naturally became part of daily prayers. This Christian way of facing suffering impressed those who knew the Molla family, becoming a silent yet eloquent testimony that faith allows one to find meaning even in the most painful circumstances. Despite these difficulties, Pietro managed to create a balanced and happy family environment for his children. Pierluigi, Laura, and Gianna Emanuela grew up with a solid education, both academic and spiritual. Pietro was demanding yet loving, instilling in them the same values he had shared with Gianna. Family vacations, often in the mountains Gianna had so loved, became privileged moments of togetherness and transmission of faith. During these trips, Pietro found time for personal conversations with each child, adapting to their age and personality. "Our father," Laura would recall years later, "knew how to be both father and mother for us, without pretending to replace Mama, but offering us all the love and guidance we needed." The special relationship between Pietro and Gianna Emanuela, the daughter for whom Gianna had sacrificed her life, was marked by deep tenderness. When the girl was old enough to understand, Pietro carefully explained to her the circumstances of her birth and her mother's heroic sacrifice. "Your life," he told her, "is an extraordinary gift, fruit of the greatest love that can exist. This must not be a burden for you, but an invitation to live fully, honoring each day the gift you have received." Gianna Emanuela accepted this spiritual heritage with admirable maturity, later deciding to follow her mother's professional footsteps by studying medicine. Her dedication to the sick and her testimony of faith became a way to continue her mother's legacy, confirming that Gianna's sacrifice had borne fruits beyond imagination. Chapter 9. Reputation for Holiness and First Steps Toward the Altars. Barely a few months had passed since Gianna's death when testimonies began to arrive at the Ponte Nuovo parish and at the Molla home from people who claimed to have received favors through her intercession. Mothers with risky pregnancies, Catholic doctors confronted by ethical dilemmas, families in crisis, all affirmed they had found in Gianna an effective intercessor before God's throne. The parish priest, initially cautious about these accounts, began to document them systematically after verifying their seriousness and consistency. These spontaneous testimonies were the first sign of a reputation for holiness that was spreading beyond the local sphere. Pietro and his relatives observed this phenomenon with a mixture of astonishment and gratitude. They had not sought to promote any cult. They had simply shared with simplicity the testimony of Gianna's life and death whenever they were asked. However, they recognized in this growing devotion a supernatural confirmation of what they had experienced in family intimacy, that Gianna had reached the heights of Christian holiness through an apparently ordinary path. "We knew her as wife and mother," Pietro commented, "dedicated to everyday tasks like any woman of her time. Her greatness consisted precisely in the extraordinary perfection with which she lived the ordinary." In 1970, in view of the persistence and multiplication of testimonies, Cardinal Giovanni Colombo, Archbishop of Milan, decided to officially initiate the diocesan process of beatification. An ecclesiastical tribunal was constituted to investigate thoroughly Gianna Beretta Molla's life, virtues, and reputation for holiness. Over several years, this tribunal collected testimonies from relatives, friends, colleagues, patients, and priests who had known her. Her personal writings, diaries, letters, spiritual notes were examined, revealing a rich interior life hidden beneath the simplicity of her daily existence. The postulator of the cause, Monsignor Bernardo Citerio, was impressed by the coherence of all these testimonies. "We find ourselves before an authentic holiness, lived in the world with naturalness and without ostentation." Parallel to the investigation of her virtues, the favors and alleged miracles attributed to her intercession were studied. Among them, the case that occurred in 1977 in Brazil stood out. A pregnant woman of 2 months with very serious complications that endangered her life, and that of the baby, invoked Gianna's intercession after learning her story through a holy card. Against all medical prognosis, both mother and child survived without sequelae. A team of Brazilian and Italian doctors, both Catholic and non-Catholic, studied the case thoroughly, concluding that there was no scientific explanation for such recovery. This case was officially presented to the Congregation for the Causes of Saints as the potential miracle for beatification. After years of rigorous examination, the diocesan process concluded positively, and all documentation was sent to Rome. The theological consultors of the Congregation for the Causes of Saints studied the material, confirming that Gianna had practiced the Christian virtues to a heroic degree: faith, hope, and charity toward God and neighbor, prudence, justice, fortitude, and temperance. On 6 July 1991, Pope St. John Paul II signed the decree officially recognizing these heroic virtues, granting Gianna the title of Venerable. 3 years later, on 24 April 1994, Divine Mercy Sunday, the same pontiff proclaimed her blessed in a solemn ceremony in St. Peter's Square. Pietro, then 81 years old, together with his 3 surviving children, participated with emotion in this celebration that officially recognized what they had lived in family intimacy. Chapter 10. Canonization, a saint for our time. For canonization, the Church requires a second miracle worked through the intercession of the Blessed after beatification. In the year 2000, a Brazilian woman in her 16th week of pregnancy suffered the premature rupture of the amniotic sac. According to every medical criterion, the situation was irreversible, and the doctors recommended termination of the pregnancy. The woman, however, rejected this option and began to invoke the intercession of Blessed Gianna after receiving a holy card with her image. Surprisingly, the amniotic fluid began to regenerate, something considered medically impossible, and months later, a perfectly healthy boy was born. The medical team unanimously recognized that there was no scientific explanation for what had happened. This case was subjected to an exhaustive verification process by specialist physicians appointed by the Congregation for the Causes of Saints. The unanimous opinion confirmed that it was a scientifically inexplicable fact, and on 20th December 2003, Pope St. John Paul II approved this miracle, definitively opening the way for Gianna Beretta Molla's canonization. On 16th May 2004, in a St. Peter's Square filled with faithful from every continent, the solemn canonization ceremony was celebrated. In the front row sat Pietro Molla, 91 years old, accompanied by his 3 children and several grandchildren. It was the first time in history that a husband attended the canonization of his wife. "We lived together for 7 intense and wonderful years," he declared with emotion. "Now we have been separated for 50 years, but soon we will be together forever." During the homily, St. John Paul II highlighted the relevance of St. Gianna's testimony. The extreme self-sacrifice that crowned her life attests that only the one who has the courage to give himself completely to God and to his brothers fully realizes himself. The Pope emphasized how Gianna had transformed the contemporary concept of self-realization, showing that true fulfillment is found in the sincere gift of oneself. Her canonization became an eloquent answer to contemporary culture, which often reduces the value of human life to utilitarian criteria. Her sanctity is particularly significant because of its ordinary character. She did not live in a convent, nor perform extraordinary visible works. Her path of sanctification unfolded amid the daily responsibilities of a professional wife and mother. Her example demonstrates that holiness is possible in any state of life, provided one lives in fidelity to the vocation received and with authentic love. Chapter 11. Devotion to Saint Gianna in the Contemporary World. Since her canonization, shrines, chapels, and centers dedicated to Saint Gianna have arisen in numerous countries. The house where she lived in Mesero has become a place of pilgrimage for thousands of faithful seeking her intercession or wishing to know her testimony better. These spaces are not only places of prayer, but also centers where a culture of life is promoted in conformity with the gospel and the magisterium of the Church. Devotion to Saint Gianna has spread especially among Catholic families, health professionals, and pregnant women. Many married couples invoke her as protectress of their home, asking her to help them live their vocation with the same fidelity and joy. Doctors and nurses find in her a model of how to integrate scientific competence and respect for life, while pregnant women in risky situations turn to her with special confidence. On 28th April, the day of her liturgical feast, special masses are celebrated in her honor in numerous parishes around the world. In these celebrations, pregnant mothers are blessed, prayers are offered for Catholic doctors, and her intercession is requested for families in difficulty. The rapid spread of her cult reflects how her testimony responds to a deep spiritual need of our time. Models of coherence between faith and daily life. Associations dedicated to Saint Gianna promote not only private devotion, but also social commitment in favor of life and the family. They organize conferences, spiritual retreats, and volunteer activities in hospitals and support centers for mothers in difficulty. In this way, the cult of the saint is translated into concrete works of charity that prolong her mission in today's world. The impact of Saint Gianna transcends the boundaries of Catholicism. People of other Christian confessions and even non-believers have been impressed by her testimony of coherence and extreme love. As Cardinal Tettamanzi expressed, Gianna teaches us that there is no greater personal fulfillment than the sincere gift of oneself, a truth that resonates in the heart of every person of goodwill, regardless of their beliefs. Chapter 12. Prayer to Saint Gianna Beretta Molla. Saint Gianna, faithful wife, self-sacrificing mother, and dedicated physician who knew how to harmonize the demands of family, profession, and faith, we raise to you our confident prayer. You who experience the joys and difficulties of daily life, understand well our struggles and longings on the path to holiness. Intercede before the Lord for all mothers, especially for those who face difficult pregnancies or health complications. Grant them, through your powerful intercession, the grace of full trust in divine providence and the strength to welcome with love the life they carry in their womb, remembering that every child is a precious gift from heaven. Protect Catholic doctors and health professionals so that they may exercise their noble vocation as an authentic apostolate in the service of life. Help them to resist the pressures of a culture that often diminishes the dignity of the most vulnerable. May they find in your example the inspiration to always defend the sacred value of every human life, from conception to natural death. Watch over all Christian families, little domestic churches where faith must flourish. May spouses, following your example and that of your beloved Pietro, build their homes on the firm rock of the gospel, living their marriage as a path of mutual sanctification. May parents be for their children the first witnesses of the faith, transmitting to them not only with words, but mainly with their example the values of the kingdom of God. Saint Gianna, you who now contemplate the glorious face of the risen Christ, intercede for all of us pilgrims in this valley of tears. Following your footsteps of fidelity in the everyday, may we live our Christian vocation with the same evangelical simplicity and burning love that characterized your brief but fruitful earthly existence. May one day, through divine mercy and with your powerful intercession, we be reunited with you in the glory of heaven. Amen.